Liberals should lump Trump. If you're a liberal, right now you might be thinking I'm crazy. But did you know in 2016, Trump waved a LGBTQ flag, one that stated the rainbow lovers supported Trump. But what has Trump done for them? Welcome to OpenViews, where I use my 20 plus years of business experience to ruthlessly research a cultural counterpoint to open your mind. Did you know Trump doesn't want petty drug crimes to keep people in prison? I'll get to that. But first, let's wave this flag. Trump appointed Richard Grenell, an openly gay man, as the U.S. ambassador to Germany. Later, he appointed him as acting director of national intelligence. This was the highest rank for an openly gay man in U.S. history. With Grenell's help, the Trump administration launched a campaign to decriminalize homosexuality in countries where it's illegal, countries such as the Middle East, Africa, and the Caribbean. In 2019, Trump became the first president to recognize Pride Month. Finally, Trump kicked off an initiative to increase funding for HIV prevention, treatment, and research. Did Trump do enough for the LGBTQ? Or did he do more harm than good? Pause the video right now and put your comments down below. Trump also cares about the environment, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I want to tell you about Trump getting people out of prison. Trump reduced sentence minimums for certain drug felonies and made this retroactive for those that are currently in prison. He did this by signing the First Step Act in 2018, a bill he publicly endorsed and influenced Republicans' support. Furthermore, with this act, Trump showed additional compassion by increasing the use of home confinement. Where that was not an option, inmates were to serve close to home and family. Speaking of those that are serving, with this act, Trump increased the amount of good time credits, which allows your sentence to be reduced for good behavior. Let's dig a little deeper. Now put yourself in the shoes of someone who served 5 years. When you get out, what's next? Honestly, what do you do? Pause this video and throw that in the chat. I want to know. I'm not sure I'd know what to do myself. Okay, now that you're back, assuming you had a place to stay, what would be the next thing that you need? Probably a job, but what do jobs usually require? Many times jobs ask for education or work experience. Now put yourself back in prison. What if while you were there, you're given vocational education? In addition to that, what if you're allowed to work to earn money and that experience that you need? That's exactly what Trump and the politicians on both sides of the aisle had in mind when they wrote this bill. While we're talking about families, and yes, I'll get back to Trump's support of the environment, but Trump worked with his daughter to ease the burden of families. These days, more and more families are dual income, and yet they're still struggling. Think about that. Maybe that's the situation that you are in. Add on top of that, a child. Think about that child. For the first few months of that child's life, who is best suited to care for that child? Probably the parent. Or if you adopt, what's the best way to get closer to that child? To spend time with them. Now picture this, 12 weeks of paid leave. That's what Trump and Ivanka pushed forward for all federal employees. Now back to this child. Fast forward past the 12 weeks. It's time to go back to work. But what are you going to do? We already established that you're a struggling family. Most people will employ childcare. That's really expensive. But what if you had an extra $3,000 to $6,000 to put towards that expense? On top of that, how about a $1,000 to $2,000 tax credit for childcare expenses? If that isn't enough, what if your place of business got a grant to cover up to 25% or $150,000 of the cost to set up childcare at your place of business? You guessed it. Trump and Ivanka pushed for that as well. Changing gears a little bit, I have a special tip for you when it comes to Trump. I'll share that with you at the end of the video. But for now, I want to show you Trump's compassion for humanity, and in some ways, his support for unions, as well as areas where he cares about the environment. I didn't forget about that. Picture Jose and Maria, fishermen at a local village. This is what provides them food, as well as an income source. One day they head out to provide for the family, but all the fish disappeared. What happened? How does the ocean even fill up with fish? You have baby fish, but how do they grow? How do they not get eaten by bigger fish? They need some kind of protection, right? Like a nursery. Well, this is what coral and mangroves do. Unfortunately for Jose and Maria, hotels have popped up destroying the coral and mangroves, and there goes the nursery. Then big corporations come in and illegally overfish, taking the rest of the population. Now, Jose and Maria have lost their livelihood, they lost their food source, lost their income, but what can they do? They're just two people. Zoom out for a second. Trump was tired of the old trade agreement, NAFTA. And so he renegotiated with Mexico and Canada and created the USMCA. Included in the agreement is stronger enforcement of illegal fishing and destruction of coral and mangroves. Fishermen in the Baja actually saw a decrease of illegal fishing. I did mention that Trump, in a sense, supports unions, something you definitely wouldn't expect. The trade agreement that I just talked about, the USMCA, also calls for fair working conditions across all three countries, and it set up a rapid response labor mechanism. As a part of that agreement, 3 major factories in Mexico were working under unacceptable conditions, and so the workers voted a union to fight for their rights, except the companies rigged the voting and chose the union of their own picking. The USMCA comes in to save the day. Those awful unions were rejected, and the USMCA ensured a fair election, which brought in new unions and improved conditions. In one example, Tridonex, an auto parts facility in Matamoros, Mexico, had to pay out $600,000. All that said, Trump has his faults. There is no question about that. But I've given you some examples where he's truly helped humanity. So throw it in the chat. Are you going to vote for Trump? Or do you still wish he'd leave the country and never come back? I can understand either way. I also mentioned I had a tip for you when it comes to dealing with Trump. While you're on the way to the polls this fall, if you happen to run into him, don't let him grab you in the pussy.